Today, the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the first case to challenge the legality of President Biden's vaccine or test mandate for workers around the country. The administration argues the pandemic allows them emergency power to institute these mandates, while a coalition of Republican states and business associations claim the rules are a dramatic power grab and overreach by an overzealous government. We'll break down the arguments in tonight's Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. Get the shot or you lose your job, or you get fines and have to do testing and masks. And there's a few details to work out here over the OSHA mandate. But basically, it's everyone's got to get the shot, more or less. That's what they're trying to do. And this has been turned into a court battle. And today we heard the arguments from both sides in the Supreme Court, oral arguments, that is. Two things going on. One is a request for a stay. So the states that have brought this have said that they don't want the federal government to be able to carry out this order from Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA officials. They want to at least wait until the Supreme Court comes down with a final constitutionality ruling on this. Essentially, does OSHA, a federal agency, have the right to do this? Does it go beyond their congressional statutory mandate? That's really the heart of it. It's a lot of legal stuff going on here. And by the way, it's not an open and shut on either side. There are strong arguments that were made today, to be fair. I think it's definitely unconstitutional, but it's not a clear-cut thing that the Supreme Court will view it that way when all is said and done. And perhaps the biggest shock for a lot of folks was how ignorant of COVID reality many of the Supreme Court justices, but really the libs we're talking about here, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Breyer, were. Here is Justice Kagan, who seems to think that the stuff we've been told about stopping the spread with vaccines and masks is effective. Listen.
We all know what the best policy is. I mean, by this point, 2 years later, we know that the best way to prevent spread is for people to get vaccinated, and to prevent dangerous illness and death is for people to get vaccinated. That is by far the best. The second best is to wear masks.
Now, masks actually are not the second best. They've been shown time and again to not do anything to reduce spread based on the imposition of mandates and then the cases thereafter. No effect on them whatsoever. They've never been able to prove any effect of masking to bring down the curve. And then also on vaccinations, as we know, they don't really stop the spread. They might limit the spread somewhat. But here is Justice Breyer, just to give you a sense of the kinds of misinformation that were going on there. Now, I understand this was maybe a slip of the tongue, a little bit of a foggy moment for the senior citizen Breyer here. But here's what he said about how many COVID cases there were yesterday.
But my question really is, what I'd like to turn this to, is stay. You heard what I asked. I mean, 750 million new cases yesterday, or close to that, is a lot. I don't mean to be facetious.
750, did he say 2 million or whatever? The point is, he said there's a lot of cases, and then he suggested that if we wait, or if the court waits before allowing the implementation of this mandate, they're effectively allowing the 750,000 cases to continue, whereas if the mandate went into effect, it would stop all of this. And that's just not true. It's not true at all. It's like, does the Supreme Court have people on it that actually read the newspaper or have access to the interwebs, Google, all that stuff? Not really. And this was stunning. There was a moment where Justice Sotomayor was like, well, what's the difference between a human body and a machine when it comes to spewing viruses? Watch this.
So what's the difference between this and telling employers where sparks are flying in the workplace, your workers have to wear a mask?
When sparks are flying in the workplace, that's presumably because there's a machine that's unique to that workplace. That is the...
Why is the human being not like a machine if it's spewing a virus, bloodborne viruses?
Why is a human being not like a machine that's used in a very specific workplace in a very specific way that creates an obvious and imminent harm to anyone using that machine? Why isn't human beings breathing just like that? Right. This has to be explained, apparently. But there's a lot that would have to be explained to particularly Justice Sotomayor, who came across today as not very smart. I'm just speaking the truth here, folks. And certainly not very well informed about the situation of COVID and the reality of the numbers across the country. Here is Justice Sotomayor claiming that Omicron, according to the numbers, so I mean, she's citing data here to make her case. Omicron, she says, is as deadly as Delta. Watch.
Vaccines do not appear to be very effective in stopping the spread of transmission. They are very effective in stopping severe consequences, and that's why our states strongly urge people to get them. But I think that makes it very hard to look at the numbers they give and assume that they still apply today. Or
Counsel, those numbers show that Omicron is as deadly and causes as much serious disease in the unvaccinated as Delta did.
That is incorrect. No person, not even Fauci, is making that case now. Everyone is saying, based on the numbers, Omicron is substantially less dangerous and lethal than the Delta and other variants that came before it. So she's wrong. But then she goes into a whole other level of wrong here discussing it. Justice Sotomayor claimed that, understand, there's about 100,000 people, 100 to 120,000 people in the hospital right now who are from or with COVID, right? That's the situation. Justice Sotomayor claimed, and didn't correct herself, that there are 100,000 children in the hospital with COVID or have serious condition, was the words that she used, with many on ventilators, which is just also bonkers, not true. Listen.
We have more affected people in the country today than we had a year ago in January. We have hospitals that are almost at full capacity with people severely ill on ventilators. We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators.
No, not even close. Not even in the ballpark of reality. This woman's on the Supreme Court, and she's deciding, based upon what she says is the extreme urgency of, for example, 100,000 children in the hospital with COVID or with serious cases, which is not true, that they should allow for the constitutionality of this. Effectively, it's such an emergency that we have to let this go. That's her argument. That's the argument of all the libs on the court, all three of them. And I worry that Justice Roberts and maybe even Justice Amy Coney Barrett will go along with this nonsense. But let's be very clear. She is wrong on core fundamental facts here. There's a problem, folks. This is a problem. And we need to make sure that the people that are in these positions of authority are held to account, to at least have the basic facts and data correct. But you see, it's not really about that for a lot of them anymore. The apparatus wants to be in control. They've made a decision. The Biden regime is going to execute on this plan, no matter how ineffective, cumbersome, and unconstitutional it may be. It's gone down to the realm of politics, my friends. That's what we're going through right now. We'll have more analysis of today's arguments with civil rights attorney Jeanine Younes when we come back. But first, I want to talk to you about protecting your online data. A lot of companies promise that privacy is guaranteed, but we know that's not true. That's why you need a new privacy and security company called Secure. Spelled S-E-K-U-R, Secure uses proprietary encryption and is offering secure instant messaging and email. With Secure, all of your communication is based on servers and data centers hosted in Switzerland without using any of the big tech platforms. Privacy is a big issue now. Without real security, people can read your emails, messages, and even your bank information. Secure will never mine your data and never asks for your phone number. You can send emails to your doctor, banker, lawyer, or anyone with total confidence that you're not being spied on by your internet provider or big tech. Secure is your solution to stop the constant theft of your digital identity. It costs only $5 for the messenger and only $10 for the messenger and email combination package. Go to secure.com and take back your privacy today. That's SEKUR.com. Use promo code BUCK for 25% off, and we'll be right back with more. Hold the line. As we reported earlier, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a case that will decide the fate of President Biden's vaccine mandate on businesses that employ over 100 people. So, who made the stronger case? Which side? Joining me now to give her legal perspective is civil liberties attorney with the New Civil Liberties Alliance, Jeanine Younes. Jeanine, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of the arguments? Did the government make its case effectively? Just break it down one side and the other side for what you heard in the strongest moments.
Sure. So I did not think that the government made its case effectively, of course, but I don't think that the mandate is legal in the first place, the OSHA mandate. The argument essentially boils down to whether OSHA, the agency, has the authority to implement a vaccine mandate. OSHA is typically about workplace conditions, so it's much more about like asbestos, tripping and falling, those kinds of hazards. And it would be really a new thing to force employees to get vaccines and to require private companies to force their employees to get vaccines. So that's what the government was dealing with. It seemed to me that 7 of the judges had serious doubts about the constitutionality. Breyer voiced some concerns. I think Breyer is ultimately going to vote to uphold it with Kagan and Sotomayor. But the other 6 had serious doubts about the constitutionality. Although I'm guessing there's going to be some kind of concurrence. I don't think it's going to be a 5-4, totally 5-4 decision.
There were some interesting moments when I was listening into the oral arguments, Janine, where the timeline came up, right? That the government is, on the one hand, you had, I think it was Breyer who said, we got to go with this. We can't stand in the way. Every day is 750,000 cases that could be prevented. He was actually saying that, by the way, could be prevented if we had a vaccine mandate. Never mind the fact that New York City has a vaccine mandate, has had one for almost 5 months now, and the highest cases of all time in New York. Anyway, but he put aside that they're deeply ignorant on the science. We'll get to that in a moment. The government seems to want to argue that there's an urgency now, but that when they instituted the rule initially, or they rolled out the rule, what was it now, 2 months ago, that it was fine to have a phase-in period. So some of the judges seem to be saying, well, which is it? Is it urgent, or is it when we think we can politically get this through?
Right, exactly. I mean, that's a huge problem with their position, that this is so urgent. I mean, on the other side, I think the justices are saying, the justices who are for this mandate are saying, well, this is sort of the first opportunity they really had. They did it as quickly as possible. I don't think that's the case. But as you said, the lack of knowledge of the science was just stunning, coming from 3 of the judges, and especially from Kagan and Sotomayor, I would say. There were some just unbelievable misstatements of fact. Sotomayor said that there were 100,000 children in critical condition from COVID. That's absolutely absurd. I don't know the exact numbers, but the numbers of hospitalizations are in the low thousands, pediatric hospitalizations. And we don't even, in a lot of those cases, those are with, not from COVID. You know, they're going to the hospital for something else. They test positive. It
also seemed as though the judges that were pro-vaccine mandate, and it's quite clear that, you know, the liberals, it's amazing. It's not a political institution, the Supreme Court, but we know exactly what they're going to say before they say anything somehow. But they seem to really think that this vaccine mandate for only businesses with over 100 employees that would be enforced starting the 10th of February, it would be highly effective. I mean, they really seem to believe that this will stop the spread, when what we've seen is that it actually doesn't stop the spread. There was an amazing disconnect today. It clearly does not stop the spread, as we are experiencing now in places that have had a vaccine mandate for many months.
Exactly. I mean, it's quite clear that the vaccine isn't that good at stopping transmission. I don't think it ever was, but it's certainly not working with the new variant. And in fact, anecdotally, I went to a couple of holiday parties over the last few weeks, and I've had COVID before. Everybody else at the party got COVID except me. Vaccinated, unvaccinated, no difference. So it's just that this virus is everywhere. The idea that we're going to stop the spread now is completely absurd.
The National Federation for Independent Businesses is asking for a stay. Here's what their lawyer, Scott Keller, had to say. I want to get you to react to it, Janine.
We need a stay now before enforcement starts. Our members have to submit publicly their plans to how to comply with this regulatory behemoth on Monday. Vaccines would need to occur by February 9th. You would need 2 vaccines to comply. Those vaccines would have to start immediately. Tracking and record keeping cannot happen overnight. And on tests, you heard my friend, the Solicitor General, mention the media reports that we've all seen about shortages of tests and cost increasing.
What do you think? Any chance at a stay? I know there was some discussion of it today.
It actually sounded to me like a stay will be issued, an administrative stay. That won't mean that much. That's not going to be there's not going to be much assessment of the merits. It's going to be sort of like, well, it's because of the imminent deadline, we have to do this. So, but it sounded to me as though a stay will maybe come later today or even this weekend.
And by the way, Justice Breyer, this issue came up of what the effects of this will be, because it was interesting. There's the constitutionality of this, the legality of it that was discussed today. And then, of course, there's it's urgent versus what will the effect of it actually be on the employment situation. It was interesting to hear Justice Breyer's analysis that somehow more people will quit if there's a small percentage of the country that's unvaccinated. Watch this.
I would find it, unbelievable that it could be in the public interest to suddenly stop these vaccinations. And the only answer that was given was a lot of people will quit. Well, OSHA considered that, and they said, in our view, yeah, that's right. Some people may quit, maybe 3%. But more may quit when they discover they have to work together with unvaccinated others, because that means they may get the disease. Okay? And more will quit because they'll maybe die, or maybe they'll be in the hospital.
I mean, it's as though he has not read a newspaper in the last month or two. Vaccinated people are getting and spreading this all over the place. That is a fact.
And it's not only that, but there's a logical inconsistency in this position, right? Because they're saying, well, they claim if you have the vaccine, you're not going to get severe disease. So maybe you'll get it, but you won't get severe disease. Well, then why do you care if other people have the vaccine or not? So the government takes sort of two positions in this case and most other vaccine cases, which is, well, we need to stop the spread, but also we need to mandate vaccines for your protection. So we need to force you to take a vaccine for your own protection. Why should the government get to tell you? I mean, should they get to tell you can't drink or smoke, or you have to maintain a certain BMI? Should your employer be able to do that because you'd be healthier and more productive? I don't think so, and I hope nobody would advocate for that. But that's essentially what this boils down to.
I had a friend today tell me that on OSHA, on the government's reading of OSHA, because of the huge increase in violent crime across the country, OSHA should be able to mandate that all store owners across America have a loaded firearm on the premises for their protection. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's why this is actually such a big deal. It's not just about vaccine mandates. It's really completely, I don't want to say unprecedented, because we've seen other abuses of sort of executive power. We've seen courts uphold that in the past. But this would really be an unprecedented expansion of OSHA's power that would allow OSHA to really, have extreme control over private companies and the individuals working at those companies.
Just one more for you, Ginny, before we let you go. We know that the next frontier in all this is going to be COVID vaccine mandates for kids. You wrote a piece in Tablet magazine that mandating COVID vaccine for children is illegal. Just give us the rundown on this.
Yeah, well, so, I think that mandating vaccines for everybody should be illegal. But for kids, it's an even bigger issue because they face such a low risk from COVID, despite what Justice Sotomayor said. And because they face such a low risk of COVID, and also because the vaccine is only EUA approved for children. There's an issue about the EUA approval for adults, but it's a little bit complicated. For kids, there's no question that the vaccine is only EUA approved. And so premising their access to education, recreational activities to be treated the same way as their peers are, premising that on their vaccination should be considered illegal.
Janine, thanks so much. Good to see you.
Great to see you, too. Thank you so much.
The January 6th Commission claims that it just wants to get to the bottom of what happened during last year's Capitol riot. So why don't they seem to care about whether Nancy Pelosi actually turned down an offer by President Trump to deploy thousands of troops to the Capitol? Well, we'll get into that. Did it actually happen? We'll be joined by former senior advisor to President Donald Trump and CEO of the social media platform GETTR, Jason Miller. Stay right there. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi both failed the American public on January 6th of last year when they refused to make sure there was adequate protection for members of Congress who were convened to certify the results of the 2020 election. As a result, Capitol Police were overwhelmed by rioters. Our friend Jason Miller has some specific thoughts on this one. We wanted to have him talk to us about it now. He is the CEO of GETTR, and he was a senior advisor to President Donald Trump. Jason, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, but great to be with you. And I would say especially a day after January 6th, which I think yesterday was the official start to the 2024 campaign. You look at sleepy Joe Biden, and I think it's hard pressed to say that he's given a more passionate, more detailed, more very specific campaign speech at any point so far in his presidency. Sounded to me like Joe Biden's off and running for 2024.
We can start with this, and there's so much to talk about with January 6th, what actually happened that day, and the parts of this that don't get any attention or coverage. I mean, because there's only so many times you could say people should not attack police, they should not break the law, they should not be vandals. I've said it, you've said it, everyone says that the laws are the laws. But okay, if they want to have committees and talk about how to stop the next one or what really happened with this one, there are some key questions like, did Nancy Pelosi or did Muriel Bowser fail to have adequate protection, and did they reject actually an offer from President Trump for National Guard troops to keep the peace on January 6th? I mean, what do we know about this?
Well, exactly. And that's something that they don't want to cover. And everything is turned into a political circus looking for 2024. And obviously the Democrats will try to extend all the way through 2022 if successful. But they don't want to get to the bottom of what actually happened, who was walking around the night before and putting things in front of the DNC or the RNC or those pipe bombs or fake pipe bombs. I don't think we're ever going to truly see the killer of Ashley Babbitt brought to justice or being held accountable for what happened there. But it does seem very specifically, as I start to see more and more names get caught up in this, that what this panel on Capitol Hill is about is trying to harass and scare people from having anything to do with President Trump in the future. Because all these names that they're going and subpoenaing, I mean, myself included, other people, they're simply Trump supporters. Nobody's who's getting these subpoenas from Capitol Hill or people who actually did anything wrong. In fact, most people weren't even in Washington, D.C. on that day. That's not what this is about.
So did President Trump try to make some offer of additional resources on January 6th with regard to National Guard? Do we know, Jason? Because PolitiFact, for example, has said that there is no evidence that Trump requested troops to secure the Capitol or consulted Pelosi ahead of the January 6th insurrection. I mean, do you have a weigh-in on this?
So from my understanding, because again, I was on the political aspect on the outside, I wasn't actually in the White House, but obviously speak with the White House folks pretty frequently, is that what President Trump had offered was 10,000 troops to go and help out, but that had to formally be requested by Muriel Bowser, the mayor of D.C. That's where, when you talk about calling up troops, that's where it actually has to come from. And so it wasn't something that President Trump could just get on the phone and call Chris Miller and say, hey, I want you to send 10,000 over and we'll just have them go march through the streets. That actually be requested by locality. But as we saw, both Nancy Pelosi, Muriel Bowser completely asleep at the switch, not even for what ultimately happened on January 6th, but even for some of the drama that we saw from some of the after dark knuckleheads, the Antifa types, or even the Oath Keeper types, or anything of that, as we saw back in December. They were completely ill prepared.
How is it that we have footage, Jason, of a pipe bomber who left pipe bombs outside of, I believe it was either the RNC or the DNC, and both, I'm sorry, it was both. That's what the team just told me. So how is it that we have video of this guy? We don't even hear that there's an ongoing investigation. I mean, we're talking about a terror. I mean, if you leave pipe bombs outside of a political headquarters, like that is terrorism, right? That's an action of lethal force against a political entity. And we never even hear about this. It seems very strange. I think people are within their rights to wonder what the heck is going on.
Well, and not only that, I'd say also the case of Ray Epps, the man who there's all this video footage of him saying, go in, go forward. And why isn't that guy being charged with anything? But you would think that Ray Epps' picture would be up in every single post office. You would think that this man in the hoodie, or I'm assuming it was a man, don't know, that was out planting these pipe bombs out in front of the DNC and the RNC. Why isn't there a national manhunt to find out who this person is? It really seems like there's some priorities that are out of whack here. And the fact that they're now essentially trying to ruin people's lives who did nothing wrong, who never even entered the Capitol, who didn't break a single thing, didn't hurt a single person. People are being peaceful and patriotic, trying to ruin their lives, but they're not actually going after some of these bad guys that are so clear right in front of us.
Jason, the January 6th defendants, I've spoken to Julie Kelly about this, among others. Julie Kelly over at American Greatness. I'm sure you know Julie, and she's been following this very closely. There are over 80 people who are still held, who have not had trials yet, who are being held in some cases in solitary confinement, administrative segregation. to deplorable conditions inside the D.C. jail system for, in many cases, non-violent crimes that they're not even charged with a violent crime, never mind whether they're guilty or not of them. Is President Trump aware of this? And is anyone from the former president's orbit trying to weigh in, draw more attention to this, and perhaps provide some assistance to these men who, whatever one may think of what they did that day, do deserve their basic rights and due process?
So, yeah, I know that they're definitely aware of it. I made the recommendation to the remaining folks who are still there with President Trump's team. I still am pretty frequent contact with them. I said that I think the president ought to put $1 million from the leadership PAC that he has going, the super PAC, and go put $1 million into helping these folks, many of them who can't even get a basic trial, who've literally been locked up and the key thrown away. Who haven't committed any aspect of a violent crime. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, even it sounds like the members of the Taliban get out and get more sunshine down in Gitmo than even some of the folks who are locked up in D.C. So this is really concerning. And again, this is about trying to punish anyone who's viewed as a Trump supporter. It's trying to send the message to anyone who's a Trump ally that as we look ahead to 2024, we're coming for you. We are going to find you. We're going to dox you. We're going to ruin your life, and you better watch out.
On to the positive, if we can, for a second here, and a big switch of the gears, Jason. I'm on GETTR at Buck Sexton, for anybody who's wondering. This is the social media platform that you are currently CEO of. It is very similar to Twitter, I think we could say that, except for the whole left-wing censorship agenda on Twitter, as well as a whole bunch of other things. You guys have been having a pretty good week. I just wanted you to have the opportunity to tell folks what's going on with GETTR these days.
Yeah, so GETTR, fastest growing social media platform in history, fastest ever to 1 million, to 2 million, to 3 million. And now just today, we crossed over 4 million users around the world. About 45% of those users here in the U.S., about 55% outside of the U.S. So it's a truly international community founded on 2 simple principles: support free speech, oppose cancel culture. That's really it. No ideological requirements or no party affiliation requirements. But we saw Dr. Robert Malone and Marjorie Taylor Greene both get kicked off of Twitter. And so Joe Rogan came out and joined GETTR. We've also had some pretty other big names this week, including someone you know well, Clay Travis, Greg Kelly, Rob Schmidt, a number of other folks. I think we're up to about a dozen MMA fighters now. Jorge Masvidal is on. We even had the reigning champion wrestler in France join today. So I think we're going to live stream. I might have to get in the ring with them, anything for extra ratings. But GETTR, GETTR, it's at the Apple Store, Google Play. Right now, I'd say our main marketplace competitors are Twitter and Facebook, if you look kind of the functionality. But here's what's coming up next. We're going to launch Vision, which will be our short video competitor to TikTok and Instagram Reels in early February. And so we have some really cool things coming up. So pretty soon, we'll be taking on TikTok and Instagram and not just Facebook and Twitter.
Fantastic. We'll be talking to you more about this soon. Jason, thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thousands of U.S. military personnel are getting kicked out of the service for refusing to comply with the government's vaccine mandate. We'll talk to retired U.S. Army Ranger and candidate for Arkansas Senate, Jake Beckett, about what the mandates have meant for the men and women in uniform. Stay with us. U.S. military personnel are getting the boot for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine. All branches of the U.S. military have taken action against as many as 30,000 unvaccinated troops. U.S. Army, the largest service with over 478,000 active duty soldiers, said it has reprimanded more than 2,700 soldiers and will begin the discharge proceedings this month. Jake Beckett is running for Senate in the great state of Arkansas. He's a retired U.S. Army Ranger, a former New England Patriot, and he's here with us to discuss the COVID surge in professional sports as well as the situation in the military. Jake, good to see you.
Buck, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
So let's start with this. What's going on in the military? Are you talking to your military brothers and sisters in uniform still about they're actually getting fired over the shot? What's happening?
Absolutely. These mandates are ridiculous, and they've never made any sense. As you know, I've spoken about this since the very beginning, and it's sickening to see the military begin the process of actually firing hundreds and soon to be thousands of high-performing, promising young soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines over these tyrannical mandates. And when I say it makes no sense, here's what I mean. So the DOD under Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said that these troops who refuse the initial vaccine shot, the initial jab, will be forcibly discharged for failure to obey a direct order. So the CDC and Dr. Fauci have continually moved the goalposts and redefined what it means to be vaccinated or fully vaccinated. Where the latest reports are that it will be up to the four shots, the initial shot, the secondary shot, and then 2 boosters. Look, I'm sure we're on the way to dozens of boosters before this is all said and done. But then Lloyd Austin came back and said, oh no, military personnel only have to take the initial shot. So that makes absolutely no sense. You're saying that you're going to discharge troops for their refusal over the initial jab of the vaccine. Then you're not going to discharge the hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of active duty troops who have not taken the secondary or tertiary or even 4th or 5th boosters. It makes absolutely no sense. They should not discharge any military personnel over refusal to take these vaccines for a couple of reasons. First of all, look, we are in no position right now as a country to be losing some of our highest performing and most promising young officers, NCOs, and enlisted personnel. But also, this is going to have a chilling effect on military recruiting. There's already a tiny sliver buck of the American population who are eligible for military service. And so right now with these vaccine mandates, you've got a lot of young, healthy, physically fit American young people who otherwise would be interested in military service. We need those people. These are young patriots. But now they're going to be discouraged. And they're going to be chilled from actually serving in our military. So we're taking that already too small population of Americans who are eligible for military service, and we're making it smaller. All in all, this is harming our military. It's making this country weaker. And this is a direct result of the Biden administration's weakness and perfidy.
Jake, what's going on with the exemptions part of all of this? I remember when there was a lot of talk about possible religious or I guess even conscientious exemptions to the vaccine, specific health exemptions, and there were going to be a lot of applications for that. Have they just essentially all been denied? Do we know what the status is of the exemption moves that people were making inside the military?
That was all a lie. It was just meant to buy time for the regime to, start out processing these people. There were some people who, thought they had some hope to, get religious exemptions. To my knowledge, all of those requests have been denied. I've been in constant contact with people who are still active duty, people in the reserves and National Guard who are going through this. It's a complete nightmare. As I've said, it's never made sense, and all these exemptions have been denied. The DOD, the Pentagon, they've almost been kind of taunting active duty personnel, about these exemptions. They're kind of proud of the fact that they dupe people into believing that these exemptions would be honored. It's a shame, and I applaud these small groups of people like Navy SEALs who have been trying to take this to court. But unfortunately, look, I'm running for the U.S. Senate, and the fact of the matter is, Buck, 90 U.S. senators a few weeks ago passed the National Defense Authorization Act. There are a lot of U.S. senators out there, even some Republicans, who like to talk about, hey, I'm defunding these tyrannical Biden mandates. That's just not true. We're funding our military. We're allocating funds to fund our military while our military is actively purging this soft purge of troops who have refused the vaccine.
Jake, shifting our COVID discussion a little bit here, it's obvious that the COVID testing policies in professional sports, like football, for example, is broken. Worse than that, these policies and mandates aren't protecting athletes and don't assure safety like most corporate bureaucrats say they do. Roughly 95% of NFL players, 97% of NBA players, and almost 100% of NHL athletes have the vaccine. Those numbers are substantially in excess of the national vaccination rate, yet all 3 leagues are setting record high numbers for positive cases. What the heck is going on?
The emperor has no clothes. This entire narrative is falling apart in real time. And there's a story that I believe, I'm sure you've been following it, Buck, but I don't think it's getting the attention it deserves, is this tennis story out of Australia. The world #1 tennis player, Novak Djokovic, is essentially in prison right now in Australia. Okay, the Australian Open, one of the major tennis tournaments, part of the Grand Slam, is about to take place in Australia. Djokovic is Serbian, and he was under the impression he traveled to Australia, this prison colony down there under the impression that he had an exemption to participate in the Australian Open. So the Australian government essentially lied to him. He's now, withering away in this, what is essentially a prison inside Australia as the government is trying to work out his exemption or just deport him back to Serbia. I mean, the Serbian government is involved. I'll give the Serbians a lot of credit. Their political leaders have been very outspoken about this. Novak Djokovic's father has been very outspoken. Djokovic himself, has been standing strong on this. And look, we need more athletes like Djokovic and Aaron Rodgers, and people across all the different leagues. Even Phil Mickelson has been speaking out about this. We need an alliance of uncancelable professional athletes who can transcend this narrative, who can break through the groupthink and the censorship in the mainstream media and get out to more Americans and more people worldwide and just highlight this hypocrisy and this madness for what it is. And I'm hopeful that this experience with Djokovic on the international stage will bring, just the emperor has no clothes reality to more people worldwide.
Jake, just real quick, the Super Bowl is supposed to be, NFL Super Bowl is supposed to be out in Los Angeles, but there are some who are talking about how in the midst of the COVID-19 panic that California is in, maybe they should start looking at other potential sites, the AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, for example, which where the Dallas Cowboys play. Do you think the Super Bowl is actually going to happen in LA, or are they going to move it?
Well, I certainly hope they move it. It's been kind of hilarious to see some of these, leftist politicians like AOC and Eric Swalwell, their own, states have introduced these tyrannical policies. And of course, they're fleeing them personally. It's the ultimate skin in the game reality. They're fleeing their own policies and going to hang out in places like Florida. And I think that pro sports leagues are going to follow suit. I mean, I think we're in the midst of this great self-sorting. You've talked about it. Other people have talked about it. Conservative media. People are going to have to go, where business is being done in the way that reflects their values. And I think the NFL, they're going to have to, flee these ridiculous policies in places like California. I don't think the Super Bowl is going to take place in LA. I think it should go to Dallas or a place like Miami, a place that reflects, conservative values, the values of most of the NFL viewing audience.
Jake, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bug.
All right, Nancy Pelosi tells an outrageous lie on the anniversary of the January 6th riot. Of course, we'll have the video for you coming up in Quick Hits. Stay with us. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tells a huge lie about January 6th, and America gets hit with yet another dismal jobs report. We got those stories in Quick Hits. Let's get right to it. Okay, Pelosi is awful. And I don't say that to get a political rise out of anybody, or I think she's just awful. I mean, she's someone who is dishonest, is a total phony, ruthless. I mean, good at wielding power, to be sure, because she'll just do whatever for the wielding of power and to maintain it and to use it. But not a person of character, decency, or any vision, really, other than, I guess, socialism. But for everyone else, not for her. She gets to live in a mansion in San Francisco and among other places. But anyway, put all that aside for a second. Pelosi asked for a moment of silence for four dead law enforcement officers, but none of them actually died on January 6th or directly resulting from it. She didn't care. Watch.
Let us acknowledge today, as I conclude, I want to acknowledge our fallen heroes of that day. U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, U.S. Capitol Police Officer Howard Livingood, Metropolitan Officer Jeffrey Smith, U.S. Capitol Police Officer Billy Evans of a later assault.
Okay, Brian Sicknick died of a stroke after January 6th. Jeffrey Smith died of suicide 1 week later. Howard Livingood also died of suicide a week later. And Billy Evans was killed in April of 2021 by a black nationalist during an attack, a vehicular attack on the Capitol. So what is Nancy Pelosi? Oh, well, she just wants to say 4 dead officers, Jan 6. Doesn't matter what the truth of that statement is, as long as it is politically useful. Yeah, that's the whole game. We also have another dismal jobs report. The Biden economy in full swing, of course. U.S. economy added far fewer jobs than expected in December, according to CNBC here, just as the nation was grappling with a massive surge in COVID cases. Non-farm payrolls grew by 199,000, while the unemployment rate fell to 3.9%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That compared with the Dow Jones estimate of 422,000. So, yeah, 199,000 versus 422,000. That is what we call a swing and a miss, folks. Not good, not good. Not what we were hoping for here, not what was expected. But this is a Biden economy. It does not go very well because you have people in charge who don't know what they're doing and just aren't very smart. Or maybe they do know what they're doing, but they don't care. That's the other argument people always make, that they actually, we all would assume that they want a better, stronger economy, more prosperity for the American people. But really what they want is more redistribution and more control. And if that comes at the cost of prosperity, wealth, and comforts in American society for a vast majority of the people out there, well, that's a price they're willing to have others pay. Biden, by the way, on economic analysis, here he is just saying some stuff. Watch.
I'm not an economist, but I've been doing this a long time. But here's the way to look at it. If car prices are too high right now, there are two solutions. You increase the supply of cars by making more of them, or you reduce demand for cars by making Americans poorer. That's the choice. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people in the second camp. You hear them complain that wages are rising too fast among very middle class and working class people who have endured decades of stalled incomes. Their view of the economy says the only solution to our current future challenges is to make the working families that are the backbone of our country poor or keep them in the state they're in.
No, but he's a moron. Anyway, let's take a look here at that. Look, is this a guys in the control room? Is this a gag or is this real? I saw this earlier today. It's a gag, right? Yeah, that's what I figured because this is pretty funny. It's funny anyway. I mean, it looks like, it didn't seem like it could be real, but it's amusing. Just send you off for the weekend with this one. Check it out.
Gen Z is full of some amazing men, women, and children that are aiming for change. And I think that is, just what our movement's all about.
But it's more than just Gen Z's falling for conspiracy theories. Why? You all right?
God, I'm so nervous. I'm so sorry.
Well, we hope you're okay. Why don't we give you some time to collect yourself? If you need help, let us know in the control room there, and we'll get back to you if we can. Well, Paul, let me tell you something. Is there any weather today?
Even if it's fake, it's great. But I mean, that's really good acting. I think we can say that, right? If that guy just pulled that off, I don't know. Seems like it can't be real, but it's a crazy world we live in. That's Hold the Line for tonight. No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly up next. Shields high.